The Galactic Council had seen many species rise to prominence, but none quite like humanity. They were loud, unpredictable, and had an inexplicable fondness for turning everything into a competition. Still, they were tolerated, barely, because they made excellent mercenaries and their cuisine had become surprisingly popular among the more adventurous species. Chef Donovan Cade had never imagined his career would end with him standing before an intergalactic tribunal, flanked by two armed human marines and facing down a 7-foot-tall feline alien who looked ready to tear his throat out. It had started 3 weeks ago at the Zenith Station, a sprawling commercial hub where 100 species mingled, traded, and occasionally tried to eat each other. Cade ran a modest restaurant called the Terran Table, specializing in fusion cuisine that blended human cooking techniques with alien ingredients. Business was good. Life was simple. Then Ravtil walked in. The young Kralxi, a species of predatory felines known for their rigid honor codes and short tempers, had ordered the daily special, seared Jovian eel with a side of roasted root vegetables. Cade had prepared it perfectly, or so he thought. The eel was tender, the seasoning balanced, the presentation impeccable. Ravtil had taken one bite, and his ears had flattened against his skull. "This is charred," the cub had hissed, his translator rendering the word with such venom that nearby patrons had frozen mid-bite. "You have ruined my meal." Cade had apologized profusely, offered to remake the dish, even suggested a complimentary dessert, but Ravtil had refused everything. Instead, he had stood, knocked the plate to the floor, and declared that his honor had been insulted. "My family will hear of this outrage," he had announced before storming out. Cade had thought that was the end of it. A bad review maybe, perhaps a stern message from the station's management. He certainly hadn't expected the Warfleet. 3 days later, 15 Kralxi battlecruisers materialized at the edge of Zenith Station's defensive perimeter. Their weapons were charged, their shields raised, and their communication was clear. Surrender, Chef Donovan Cade, or face annihilation. The station administrator had nearly fainted. The human embassy had erupted into chaos, and Cade had found himself in a holding cell, wondering how a slightly overcooked piece of eel had escalated into an interstellar incident. The Galactic Council had convened an emergency session. Representatives from 60 species gathered in the Grand Chamber, their holographic forms shimmering in the low light. At the center of the floor stood Fleet Commander Thralix of the Kralxi, Ravtil's father, his golden eyes blazing with righteous fury. "My son's honor has been violated," Thralix declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This human, this chef, deliberately served him charred food, a grave insult in our culture. The offense demands satisfaction. Surrender him to us for punishment, or we will extract him by force." The council erupted into argument. Some species called for Cade's immediate extradition. Others questioned whether a culinary mishap warranted military action. The Kralxi delegation remained unmoved, their warriors standing like statues behind their commander. Then humanity's representative stood. Ambassador Chen was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many negotiations go sideways. She walked to the center of the chamber with measured steps, her hands clasped behind her back. "Fleet Commander," she began, her voice calm, "I understand your concern for your son's honor. However, I must inform you that you are making a grave mistake." Thralix's tail lashed. "Are you threatening us, human?" "No," Chen replied. "I'm warning you. You see, there's something you should know about Chef Cade. Before he became a restaurateur, he was Lieutenant Cade of the Human Expeditionary Marines. He served 3 tours in the outer reaches, earned 2 Purple Hearts and a Medal of Valor. He's killed more sentients in hand-to-hand combat than most of your warriors have seen in their lifetimes." The chamber fell silent. "But that's not even the relevant part," Chen continued. "The relevant part is that humanity has a very specific cultural tradition when it comes to protecting our own. We call it proportional response. You brought 15 battle cruisers to threaten one chef over a slightly overcooked meal. So let me tell you what happens next." She tapped her datapad. Behind her, a holographic display materialized, showing a star chart. Red markers began appearing, dozens, then hundreds of them. "That's the 3rd, 7th, and 12th human battle fleets," Chen said. "Currently in formation at Jump Point Delta 9. 800 ships, enough firepower to glass your homeworld 3 times over. They've been there for 2 days waiting for my signal. Thralix first stood on end. You would start a war over this? Oh, it gets better, Chen said with a cold smile. We've also contacted the Merchants Guild, the Tourism Board, and every major news network in the galaxy. Do you know what happens to a species' reputation when they mobilize a warfleet because their prince got a crispy meal? You'll be a joke, a punchline. Every diplomatic function, every trade negotiation, people will remember the time the Kralxi nearly started a war over lunch. Ravtil, who had been standing beside his father, looked suddenly uncertain. His ears drooped. But here's what we're going to do, Chen said, her tone softening slightly. Chef Cade is going to apologize to Ravtil. He's going to remake the meal perfectly this time. Ravtil is going to accept the apology gracefully, and then everyone is going to go home, and we're all going to pretend this never happened. Does that sound reasonable? Thralix's jaw clenched. His pride warred with his pragmatism. Finally, he dipped his head in the slightest of nods. Acceptable. 20 minutes later, Cade stood in a temporary kitchen set up in the council chambers, preparing Jovian eel for the second time. His hands were steady despite the assembled dignitaries watching his every move. When he plated the dish and presented it to Ravtil, the young Kralxi ate in silence. It is adequate, Ravtil finally said, which was the closest thing to an apology his species could manage. Cade bowed. I'm honored by your patience, young master. As the Kralxi fleet departed and the council dissolved, Ambassador Chen found Cade in the corridor. You okay, Chef? Cade let out a long breath. I charred some eel and almost started a war. Welcome to galactic politics, Chen said with a wry smile. But remember, humans don't back down. Not from bullies and definitely not from anyone who threatens our people over burned food. Cade nodded slowly. Humanity, he reflected, might be loud and unpredictable, but they looked after their own, even the chefs, especially the chefs.